My dear students, parents, teachers, and principals of all our council affiliated schools across India and abroad, welcome to this CISCE virtual learning series. It is the council's humble gesture and initiative to reach out to our students through our exclusive YouTube channel using StreamYard. We are in the 6th month of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the crisis does not seem to relent anytime soon. Given that all schools are closed, the council has decided to proactively involve its students in some teaching learning activity through this initiative. While many schools have been doing excellent work in conducting online classes for its students, yet there are some schools which have not been able to do the same for their students. The council is concerned about these students, especially those at the ICSE and ISE level. Therefore, the council has arranged for subject experts for all the major subjects at the ICSE and ISE levels to address students' concerns and to suitably guide them in these subjects. These lessons can be viewed exclusively on the CISCE YouTube channel. I request all our students to be attentive and participate actively in these interactive live lessons. I am confident that our subject experts will be able to assist and motivate each one of you. Lastly, I would like to place on record my most sincere gratitude to Mr. Francis Joseph for coordinating with our research division and examination sections to make this possible. We plan to continue this series for as long as we can so that the council can reach out to our teaching community in general and to our students in particular. Thank you and happy learning.
Good afternoon. Today we are looking at the Tempest Act 5 Scene 1, lines 1 to 171. I hope all of you have your texts with you because I shall be pointing out important lines which will help you to understand your text better. Act 5 is known as the resolution of the play, but it has its roots in Act 3 when Ariel, in the guise of the harpy, had had pointed out to Alonso and his companions that they had committed a grave sin towards Prospero and his infant daughter Miranda. They would have to suffer for this. In fact, Alonso already realizes that he is suffering for it. He believes that he's lost his son in the Tempest. And Ariel points out that they can only come out of their situation if they depict heart sorrow and a clear life ensuing. In Act 5, therefore, we find Prospero's revenge is complete. He has taken adequate revenge over his enemies. May I have the presentation, please? And therefore, what does he say? He begins the scene with saying, now does my project gather to a head. My charms crack not. I want the next slide, please. My charms crack not. My spirits obey. So he says, my project, my plan for revenge has reached its heights. My charms, my magic charms do not crack. My spirits are obeying me, meaning Ariel and his attendant spirits. And time is conducive to him, is on his side. And he brings in the concept of time when he asks Ariel, about the time, and Ariel says that it is the sixth hour when their work would cease. This is brought in perhaps because Shakespeare wanted to point out that in this play he has rigidly adhered to the unities of time, space, and action, which is not so in a majority of his plays. Next, now he asks Ariel about the condition of his enemies. Remember, he had told Ariel to carry out the punishment that he had derived from them. And Ariel says that they are confined together. He gives a very moving account of the pathetic condition to which Prospero has reduced his enemies. They are confined in the lime grove, lime meaning lime or linden trees, which whether defend Prospero's cell, they cannot move and they are distracted or have lost their senses. What greater punishment can there be than losing your mind? Looking at Alonso, Sebastian, and Antonio, the other nobles are mourning over them. And especially Gonzalo, who is sorrowful and dismayed as their condition. And Prospero says that Gonzalo's tears run down his beard like winter's drops, like the drops of winter rain that drops from the thatched roofs of cottages. The charm has worked so strongly on them. And next slide, that he says that if Prospero saw them, his spirits would become tender. Tender here means soft. Strangely enough, Ariel is a spirit, that therefore he is above or beyond all human feeling. But the theme of forgiveness is introduced by Ariel, a spirit. And Prospero is a little taken aback and he says, "Dost thou think so, spirit?" And Ariel says, "Mine would, sir, were I human." This comment affects Prospero, who realizes that if Ariel, a spirit, can think in this way, he, being a human, should be compassionate. He says, "Shall not myself, one of that kind, shall relish, shall feel all as sharply passion as they." Next, they say that he says that I should be kindlier moved than thou. So he says that though he's still struck to the quick, all right, he's still hurt, he's still upset by the grave wrongs, high wrongs, he says, but he will deal with his fury, he will balance his fury with his reason. And therefore, he realizes that the rarer action, the higher quality is virtue. And what is the biggest virtue but forgiveness and vengeance? So, the idea of repentance, which we have seen in the harpy scene, is now repeated here. Prospero feels that since Alonso is repentant, in fact, you will see that Sebastian and Antonio are not very repentant, but Alonso is. So, since his enemies are repentant, he will break his charms and restore their senses. And he sends Ariel to fetch Alonso and his nobles. Alonso departs to fetch Alonso and the others, and Prospero draws a magic circle. His last works of magic, last deeds of magic are taking place here. The greatest deed, of course, was the mask, as you can see, where he had shown his skill as a magician. But now he draws a magic circle next, and he calls down, he invokes the elves and spirits who have aided him in his magic. He talks about them. He says that what are the activities? They chase the ebbing Neptune. They flee from him when the sea comes back. They make sour ringlets. Here, Shakespeare is alluding to a superstition that the rings that one found in the grass early in the morning were made by fairies when they danced around them, and the grass would turn sour, so the sheep would not eat the grass. And the mushrooms which would come up by midnight, mushrooms just mushroom. That's why we have the adjective. He says that the people believe that the elves and fairies made these mushrooms. And These elves, they work best at night. So therefore, they rejoice at curfew, which was the time for all human beings to be indoors. But though he says all that, he admits that these spirits are weak. In a way, he's talking about his own magic also. Magic can only work up till a certain moment, it cannot work all the time and for everything. So he says that they are weak masters. He's called them demi puppets. And he lists what he's done with their help. He has dimmed the noontide sun. He has aroused storms on land and sea. He has added lightning to thunder. He has split open the oak, which was considered to be Jove's tree, with the thunderbolt, which was again Jove's weapon. Next. And he says he has he has created earthquakes. Graves have opened at his command and yielded their dead. All right, this is the first time that we hear about this aspect of Prospero's magic. However, Prospero feels that now his work has been done, all right, and therefore he will abjure, he will reject this rough magic. Now, see, he's a philosopher, he is a master of the liberal arts. So, therefore, the magic was in comparison a lower art, a lower science. So now he gives up this rough magic. And the last thing that he asks the elves for is music. Why? Because he wants the music to work his purpose, to perform his purpose. So you see that there's a sense of fulfillment, of closure in his words. In a way, he's bidding farewell to his magic. There's still some bit after that where he says that now, after everything is done, he shall break his magic staff and bury it in the earth. And also, he will throw his magic book of magic. Now, remember, this book of magic was very special to him. Gonzalo had outfitted him when he and Miranda were put on that boat. Gonzalo had put his books of magic onto that boat, isn't it? So, but now he is bidding goodbye to his magic because he has achieved his purpose. Next slide, please. And now we find Ariel coming in with Alonso and his nobles. They enter the magic. They enter the magic circle. Next slide, and they stand charmed. All right, they're struck by magic. And Prospero talks about the music that is being played. Today in psychology, we talk about the power of music, isn't it? We say that it can comfort a disturbed mind. Shakespeare, so many years ago, so many centuries ago, in the 16th century, talks about magic as a solemn comforter, as a solemn air, and the best comforter to an unsettled fancy. Fancy, yes. You will also note that in a play where hierarchy is so important, remember Act 1, Scene 1, where, uh, you know, Alonso wants to talk to the master of the ship because Alonso is a king and the master is the head of the ship. Here, Prospero upsets hierarchy and he first greets Gonzalo, all right? And he calls him my true preserver and a loyal sir, to him you followest. He turns to Alonso also and he reminds him that you had treated me and my daughter in a very bad way. And as he says this to them, he notices how the charm or the magic is slowly dissolving. And he uses the beautiful image of morning melting or dispelling the darkness. Just as morning dispels darkness, reason is coming into their minds, dispelling the darkness of ignorance, of evil from their minds. Next, he addresses, uh, he addresses Sebastian and his own brother. Next slide, please. And he reminds them of their deeds. And he says, but surprisingly, he forgives them very easily. He says, I forgive him, you, unnatural though thou art. All right? Uh, because they cannot. Now their understanding is swelling, is coming back. And the sea image, remember, the sea is a ruling image in the play. The play is named The Tempest. So the understanding begins to swell, and the approaching tide of what? Of reason, will slowly fill the shore that is now lying, the mind which is lying disturbed. But he realizes that he is in his magician's robes, and perhaps they will not be able to recognize him. So he sends Ariel to his cell to get his robes of what he was, the Duke of Milan. Next slide. And he says, I will discase me, I will take off my magical robes and present myself as I was sometimes Milan. As Ariel helps Prospero to dress, he sings of a life of freedom in the midst of nature. Because Ariel realizes that he too would be able to, get his freedom because his work is done. And Prospero appreciates Ariel and he says, now, why, that's my dainty Ariel. But he has more work in store for him. He sends him to Alonso's ship to get the crew members and the master of the ship. Remember, in Act 1, Ariel had reported how he had put a charm on the crew, all right, so that they had fallen asleep. Of all the king's followers, Gonzalo is the first to regain his senses. Next slide. And what does he say? He says, all torment, trouble, wonder, and amazement inhabits here. From the time that they've come to the island, there has been what? One strange thing after another that is happening. And he really cannot understand. And even when Prospero presents himself as the wronged Duke of Milan and he embraces Alonso, so that by touch Alonso will be able to realize that this is he is living. Alonso cannot believe it. He thinks that is yet another enchanted trifle, another enchantment, another magic trick of the island. All right, but he admits that the affliction of his mind is receding, and he, perhaps it's Prospero's magnetic personality, perhaps it's his charm that immediately upon recognizing his Prospero, he says, the dukedom I resign. All right, or is it a quality of the island that they all come back and their better senses prevail? Next, all right. Prospero again speaks to Gonzalo first, and he says, first, noble friend, let me embrace thine age, whose honor cannot be measured or confined. And though both of them, Alonso and Gonzalo, are confused, he tells them that they are experiencing some of the subtleties, some of the deception of the island. He welcomes them, addressing them as friends. But this time, look at his tone towards Sebastian and Antonio. He calls them traitors. He says, but you, my brace of lords, were I so minded, were I so inclined, I could pluck his highness's crown of you on you and justify you traitors. All right? But and he also talks to Antonio and reminds him of the rankest, of the worst fault that that his brother had you know had been so treacherous towards him, and he demands his dukedom back. Next. But Alonso now, he doesn't know. He now wants to know how he been saved and how has he come to this island. How have both, now Alonso has also come to this island, he finds Prospero there. All right. And as he says this, because he knows that his ship was wrecked and his sorrow is aroused again because he remembers that he had lost his son Ferdinand. All right. And Prospero, of course, tells him to be patient and cryptically says that patience had helped him to bear a similar loss. And Alonso cannot understand what he's saying. Next, and he says that it is as great to me as late and supportable. He says, I don't have the means, because he had lost his daughter. In a sense, he had lost his daughter because he had given his daughter to Ferdinand. The ending of the play is foreshadowed here when Alonso exclaims that he wishes that his son and Prospero's daughter, isn't this the end that Prospero has been working for? And he says that he wishes that they were living and they were the king and queen of Naples. Prospero doesn't answer, but he says that he notices the curiosity, the wonder of the others, and he says that he's lost his daughter in the last tempest. He welcomes Alonso into his cell, and they had been imprisoned very close to his cell in the grove beyond his cell. And he says that I will recount all the events that had occurred up till now. And Prospero welcomes them very much as the master of the island. The cell is his court. And here he has few attendants. Remember this. He has few attendants. You and I, as the audience, know that he's referring to Ariel and Caliban and servants none abroad. And he also promises Alonso, he says, since you have given me my dukedom, I will requite you, pay you with a good thing. I will also give you something good next. And this brings us to the second movement of the action of the play, which we will deal with in a subsequent class. There is an assignment for you. The next slide. There is an assignment for you, which perhaps you could work it out at home, discuss with your teachers, describe Prospero's state of mind at the beginning of Act 5. How has the playwright brought in the idea of forgiveness? And for this, you will have to look at the entire play. And finally, contrast Prospero's attitude towards Alonso and Gonzalo with that towards Antonio and Sebastian. This must have raised some questions in your mind. You would do well to think about these questions. We have some questions here. What does Prospero mean by my charms crack not? Prospero has used magical charms. He has used magic to achieve everything. And he is very happy at this point that his magic has helped him along, has not failed him in any way. Next question. Uh, Ariel's words about Alonso and Gonzalo. Ariel is a spirit, and the way he says it, that they are in a very, very tormented state. They are in a very uh, distracted state. All right, Prospero is initially taken aback that Ariel can talk about this. Ariel is a spirit, but it helps him to introspect. And that's why he says the rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance. Though he is upset with their high wrongs, he shall not, dwell upon that, but he will forgive them. All right? Yes? Uh, yes, this is a question, that uh, we often ask, many students ask, we also ask. There's no one answer, but probably the only logical answer is that he's not a vindictive man. He's a wronged man. Please get this clear in your heads. He is wronged. And that is why he has behaved this way. And he's upset because, he had trusted people so much. And now that his purpose has been achieved, he forgives them. And he realizes, and in a way, it's a very Christian play. So he forgives his enemy because forgiveness is the highest Christian virtue. And here, therefore, Prospero, depicts this virtue to his enemies. Next question. Prospero was a scholar. Remember that. He's a scholar. He was the prime duke and known all through for his mastery of the liberal arts and the listen to his other accomplishments, to his other realms of study. Perhaps magic is an inferior aspect. So, therefore, rough, because magic can only achieve so much. It cannot achieve everything, which is why he wants to, after his purpose is achieved, he wants to bury his book, he wants to bury his staff and his book. At the beginning, usually it goes through a gamut of moods in this scene. At the beginning, he's in a victorious state of mind. All right, but after listening to Ariel, there is an element of forgiveness that comes in. But definitely, this is a more mellow Prospero that we are meeting than we have met at the earlier in the earlier acts of the. Yes, this is, of course, as you know, Shakespeare's last play. So it is Prospero's farewell to his magic, is also Shakespeare's farewell to his craft. All right. We have seen in Act 4, as he's talked about, this globe itself is going to, it's an illusion. The entire world is an illusion. Everything will disintegrate. And therefore, for Shakespeare, it is like his farewell to arms, his farewell to his art. We can draw a comparison between the two. The rarer, the higher action, the higher quality. All right, we have a lot of virtues. The highest virtue, he says, is the virtue of forgiveness, as opposed to an attitude of vengeance. Reconciliation forms only a part of the Tempest. Initially, there is no reconciliation, but yes, the play moves towards reconciliation. The magic, it is again Prospero's last magical act. He is bringing them into the magic circle so that they would be they would be charmed again by his magic. So he draws the magic circle. Quoting the text is advisable. It is desirable. No, marks are not always affected by things like this. Jove, as you know, in Greek mythology, is the king of gods. There are a lot of biblical and Greek allusions in this play. It would do you well to study them carefully. And the thunderbolt is his weapon in Greek mythology. The seas are merciful because they have returned his father to him, because he thought his father was dead. But his father has been returned to him. And up till in the first act, if you remember, he was very upset that he had lost his father. But now his father has been returned to him. We cannot call it a soliloquy, because in a soliloquy, a character speaks to himself on the stage. All right. And soliloquy serves to give us an idea of the character himself. It might be called a monologue, though it's not strictly a monologue, because he is he's invoking the else. A monologue is when in a conversation, a single character. He can be called power hungry. At this point, this is the post-colonial view of Prospero. He's not power hungry. He gives up power. Remember, because he asks his brother to look after the kingdom, and up till and the next, is that he wants his authority back because it has been unfairly taken away from him. But the post-colonial view of Prospero, looked at from Caliban's point of view, he might be called power. He uses magic for his own ends to a great part of the play, apart perhaps from the mask scene. Dainty because Ariel is a very delicate spirit. So therefore the word dainty to mention that he is very delicate as opposed to the earthy Caliban. Yes, he is in the magic robes. He is in command. He is directing all the activities of the play. We do say that he's omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, isn't it? So at this point, he is the supreme character. You're very right. Yes, it's very. He says it very cryptically, isn't it? He's lost his daughter, and Alonso takes it at face value, just as he's lost his son. But by giving his daughter to Ferdinand, now Miranda will be Ferdinand's wife first, not so much Prospero's daughter. But he says it very cryptically, and therefore Alonso really cannot understand what he's trying to say. He takes it literally. I would say sensible, but sensitive towards the end of this act. And he's sensitive to everyone apart from Caliban. All right. And there lies another tale altogether. But he is quite sensitive. He is quite rational. All right. That he has to forgive them. What would he do with them? So he is rational towards the end. This would cover the entire play, isn't it? Ariel is a spirit of the air, whereas Caliban is a spirit of the earth. And therefore, Prospero uses both of them in two very different areas of activity. All right? So, uh, Ariel does all the refined magical acts, whereas Caliban is given all the menial tasks. So this is the basic kind of difference between the two. Otherwise, you have to go into a complete character analysis of the two characters. Yes, the magic has saved his life, but remember, he's a scholar. So, because he's a scholar, he realizes, and in the Christian world, the world that Shakespeare inhabited, magic was always looked down upon, though James the First himself dabbled in magic. So, when he had introduced magic, perhaps it was a nod to the king, all right, who was his mentor in a way. So, in comparison to the other aspects of his learning, magic is an inferior art or science, as I was saying. He didn't suffer this much for just learning magic. He was a scholar. If you're just saying that because he learned magic, he suffered this much, that would be a very incorrect assessment of the play. We talk about the liberal arts. Remember, the Renaissance was a time of learning, all right, and therefore they set great store by learning. Magic was also there because he says for liberal arts, and he was involved in secret studies. But he also realizes that magic can only serve his purpose up till a point. Beyond it, now in the real world where he's going, the world of real politics, there magic would not really help him. Yes, this is a question. Alonso too had been a part of the plot against Prospero. All right. And you find that Prospero is much gentler towards Alonso. Of course, he doesn't say much to Sebastian and Antonio too. And this is a question that we have to think about. Is it because Now he's giving his daughter to Alonso's son. Is that the reason? One doesn't really have a clear-cut answer to this. The frantic gesture was it's a dramatic device. The frantic here means that his actions were to show the audience that he'd lost his mind, his senses. The metaphysical realm is the realm of magic, the realm, the whole island itself is a magical island. So much happens on the island. So all that refers to the metaphysical realm. The minds of all the Alonso, Sebastian, Antonio, and all the nobles. The Tempest, because it begins with a tempest. The initial action of the play is because of it's a tempest, but also the tempest refers to the tempest in the lives. The tempest at sea brings about a tempest in the lives of a majority of the characters. There's an upheaval, just as a tempest causes evil in nature. Here too, it causes an upheaval in the lives of the Ariel is a creature of the air. So I drink the air before me. He is celebrating his return to to the air, to the world of nature, and I will return in the wink of an eye before your pulse can beat twice. Yes. Is it one question? Is it that Antonio is scared? Or of retribution because he said, I can declare you traitors? All right. Or is it again one of the magical aspects of the one has to think about these are the thoughts. Remember, literature is always open to interpretation, so there are possibilities. Yes, it refers to the whole action of the play takes place within a day. So the 6th hour, I said that Shakespeare was reminding his audience that he had abided by the unities of time, space, and action. I've answered this question before. He had lost his daughter because he's given his daughter to Ferdinand. In a sense, therefore, his daughter is lost to him. He calls on his elves and fairies because these are the attendant spirits of Ariel, all right, and he invokes them. It's a kind of recapitulation of all that these elves and fairies and Ariel spirits have helped him to do. And he calls on them to sort of, in a way, a kind of a thanksgiving. These are the things that I have achieved through your help. And this was the last question. Thank you very much.